Welcome. HANDI's about a year old. We're a not-for-profit community enterprise company, which is why you've not had a lavish lunch to start. Supported primarily by voluntary effort of a small number of people and some modest sponsorship, not least for these workshops, which are supported by the knowledge transfer networks of the Technology Strategy Board, which is part of whatever the Department of Industry calls itself these days. Department of Skills and Industry or something. So we're a not-for-profit community enterprise company. We're there to support anybody with an interest in apps, in lightweight digital tools across that community. So developers, health and care professionals, patient service users and carers. And we also have within our community academics, investors, people from what you might call the traditional health IT sector. So what do we mean when we talk about apps, or what I've started to call lightweight digital tools, because already people are talking about the post-app world. So we're not just talking about things that are mobile. Apps are often mobile, they often run on mobile devices, but they're mobile when they need to be, and they might be plugged into a wall when they're not. So you can imagine an app running for a surgeon on a large high-definition screen on their desk, looking at a clinical image, making a decision about where he's going to remove the cancer, walking onto the ward with his tablet device to take the patient through the consent process, and maybe filling in a discharge summary on his iPhone on the way home. So they'll be connected when they need to. Typically, apps aim to do something well and beautifully, rather than everything mediocrely, which is typically what you get from the traditional health IT systems. At their best, they provide a broad range of functions to do everything that you want, but normally none of it terribly well. So they're connected when they need to be. They make heavy use of pre-existing components and services. They're built using well-defined frameworks. And because of those things, it's order of magnitude cheaper and faster to develop and deploy an app. And this has all sorts of benefits. It allows you to develop a niche solution which wouldn't have been affordable in the old world. And it allows you to experiment. And one of the mottos of HANDI is fail fast. Fail fast is good. There's a long history in the NHS of failing very slowly with IT. What you do is you spend, do take a seat, you spend £12 billion in 10 years. And you realise in the first 3 days that what you're doing is completely mad. But you can't possibly stop because of all the money that you're spending. And you spend your time justifying your failure rather than simply saying, useful experiment, we can learn from that, throw it away, start again, do something better. In the app world you can do that. If you spent a weekend and £15 on developing something and you realise it's either not going to fly or it's not very well implemented, you can throw it away and start again. So it supports fail fast. And we're about giving everybody the tools they need to manage their health, care and well-being. So whoever that person is, a healthcare professional, a patient, somebody in that patient's informal care network, a health service manager, you need a set of tools to support your role, allow you access to the information and knowledge that you need to perform that role and to manage transactions digitally along the care pathways that you're managing. And the challenge is to get those things to work together. So this is where we are with the app world at the moment. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gartner Hype cycle. All technology follows this path. It starts here, something interesting, and it gets more and more interesting. Lots of stuff falls by the wayside as it goes up here, and it reaches this point here, which is called the peak of inflated expectations. And at this point, politicians and senior officials get to hear of it and they think it's going to solve all their problems very easily for no money. And that's roughly where we are with apps at the moment. So there are people in the senior levels of the NHS who think if you give a few developers some pizzas over a weekend, they'll achieve over the weekend what the national programme and £12 billion failed to achieve in 10 years. I think there's a bit more chance in achieving something meaningful over a weekend in that model, but it's not a magic solution. So then, sadly, you go down here to the trough of disillusionment. And my role in life, bizarrely, is to explain to some of these senior people, this is all very good, but it's not quite as exciting as you think, and to manage their disappointment, because it is worth it to get here. Sadly, nobody's worked how to take technology in a linear way from here to there, or they'd become very rich. So that's where we are at the moment. So I believe that this new way of working with lightweight digital tools, user-centred agile design has got tremendous potential, but there are some difficult tasks that we have to solve to make it work together, which we know how to address, but they're not straightforward. We have two visions. We have the heavenly vision. As a healthcare professional, you have a range of apps that beautifully perform all the functions that you need to perform. They come from a range of vendors, but they all work together. They're interoperable. They're orchestrated to work across the care pathway. They're form factor and device agile, so you can use them whatever device happens to suit you at that moment in the day. And they've agreed some standards about things like user interface design, so that that user interface is consistent and not dangerous. There's the hellish vision. You have all these apps, which individually are very good and beautiful at what they do, but to get data from one to the other, you have to do clunky kludge and paste or type it in again. They're not orchestrated, so the handover as you go from taking your bedside observations to issuing your prescription as, say, a nurse in an inpatient unit is clunky, and the user interface is sufficiently different that it's actually dangerously confusing as you move from one to the other. Sadly, the hellish vision is what you get if you don't take any steps not to, and we're a little bit in that space at the moment because we want things to be there. So there are challenges there. Then there are challenges about business models. You know, you're not going to make yourself rich downloading a healthcare app to a few hundred, or if you're very lucky, a few thousand people for £1.99 or whatever the maximum price that people are willing to pay for these things is. So what business models might you apply to actually build a sustainable business around delivering these sorts of apps and tools? Is it part of a service that otherwise charged for? How can we explore the idea of health and care professionals prescribing apps for their patients to use? And I think you'll hear from some of the speakers later about some of the business models they've used to get their businesses going. Then the whole issue of quality. Two sides to that. As an app developer, how do you ensure that you meet the quality standards that you're legally required to meet and that your customers expect you to meet? Particularly things like the Medical Devices Directive, which is a bit of a minefield for app developers. And also, if you do spend and invest money on developing apps that have good quality clinical content, are clinically assured, are safe and appropriate for the target audience to use, and you've invested in that quality, how do you actually demonstrate to your customers that you've done that? And how do you differentiate yourselves from the snake oil salesman, of which there are many out there, who all they've got is a very beautiful app, but actually it's dangerous? Because if you're producing snake oil, the thing you must do is produce a very beautiful bottle and a nicely designed label. If you know you have the elixir of life, you may be tempted to stick it in an old milk bottle and just put a screw top on it, and that's a mistake. So lots of issues around quality from both the developer's perspective and that of the thing. What do we want to create? What do we want to create in this world is a digital health and care ecosystem. And I'll take a brief technical diversion, because what we're saying is, in order to crack these problems of interoperability, orchestration, you need some infrastructure to support that. Some of that infrastructure is technical, some's cultural, some's about governance, but here's the technical piece. So this is what we envisage the future world looking like. That at the user interface level, there will be what I've called apps, but they might be applications running in a web portal or a traditional app running on a PC. They're the things that face the user. But in order for them to work together, they need to be able to store information and retrieve information. So if they're collecting information about patients or service users, they need some sort of electronic health record to store it in. If they want knowledge, if they want to know what the latest guidance is from NICE or the current care pathway that's been adopted by their trust, or they need data from a drug database to support their prescribing activity, they might need information from a knowledge database. If they're booking services, they'll need something like some sort of enterprise-wide scheduling thing, what we'd probably call choose and book in the NHS environment. If they want to populate that information and share it with the patient, they might want to update information in a personal health record that the patient controls and maintains. You want to know where your patient service and service users, where they are, who they are, and where their information is stored. So you'll need some sort of registry service, which again in NHS context we'd probably call the personal demographic service. So you have apps at the top and you have a set of services at the bottom. There could be multiple alternatives for these. You have a choice of drug databases that you use. You might have a choice of places where you choose to store your record. Indeed, an individual patient might store some of their record in one place and some of their record in another. And then you need something to make those things communicate with each other and communicate with that app layer. And that's, I've represented here as something called an enterprise service bus. An enterprise service bus is something that just manages the communication between applications and the back-end services. And it can do some interesting things around transforming formats and managing things like authentication and perhaps consent management and a whole range of things there. And again, in the NHS context, NHS Spine, and interestingly, NHS Spine is just being re-engineered as an open source product, is an enterprise service bus. So that's the sort of world that we're moving into. And NHS England are currently extremely enthusiastic to encourage app developers to develop innovative apps in this space. They're keen to encourage SMEs, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the traditional system vendors to open up their systems with open interfaces. So that if you do want to collect information, say from patients in this sector in mental health, and persist some of that data in the GP record, that it will be easier to get access to those systems, both to retrieve information and store information back in those systems. And we can talk about that later. So HANDI are here to facilitate networking with events like this, to encourage learning, cooperation, competition and innovation. And I think cooperation and competition can coexist side by side. If you're a health and care professional with a good idea and want to meet a professional developer who can help you turn that into a product, we hope we can make that introduction. If you're somebody who's worrying that the design of your product from a user interface design is not quite what you'd like it to be, we can introduce you into people with expertise in design. If you've got together with those people and now decide that you want to commercialise your product, we might be able to help you find access to a financial institution, a business angel, a private equity fund who's interested in investing in interesting startups in this area. If you think your product is something that has social rather than commercial value, we might be able to introduce you to people with an interest in sponsoring such applications. So it's all about those sorts of things. Building links with all segments of the community, and they're the sections that are represented in the 1,200 plus members that HANDI now has. And also we're lobbying to say you need to create an environment in which the promise of this new way of working can actually be delivered. So that's about creating the right sorts of cultural environment, procurement frameworks. A lot of app developers are very frustrated about how difficult it is for a SME to sell into the NHS, for example. And some of the technical infrastructure that I've talked about. So we're very active with NHS England, with Cabinet Office, the Technology Strategy Board, trying to represent back what our members are saying are barriers to them doing what they're trying to do in this space. And we deal with all sorts of things. We talk about platforms, what's the best platform to use, business models, what business models might you apply, what standards are out there that might be helpful in facilitating interworking and orchestration, what tools and services are available to you that might help. If you're looking for a cross-platform development tool, which will mean your thing will run out the box on Android, Apple and Microsoft, just doing it once, what might be out there to help you? And our aim is to show the community the possibilities and let individuals decide. Because what we seek to be is agnostic on many things. We're equally happy to help you if your motivations are commercial. So if you hope to develop the Facebook of healthcare IT and make yourself fabulously rich, that's fine. We're equally happy to help you if your objectives are more about social value and you want to form the Wikipedia of health and care and become very famous and make no money. We can also support that. We can tell you about the various benefits of Apple versus Android versus Microsoft, but we're not here to push one of them, and we hope we can give an independent view so you can make your choice, and indeed encourage you to look at cross-platform ways of developing things. There are plenty of standards out there. The marvellous thing about standards is there's so many to choose from, and we can help you with that daunting task, and we promise not to develop any new ones of our own. Because somebody decides there are 14 standards in healthcare, I'll develop one unifying standard. What you end up with is 15 standards in healthcare. Just a quick plug, we're running a major conference and exhibition not far from here on the 5th and 6th of November at NEC Birmingham. That's co-hosted with CHI Live, which is one of the big trade shows in healthcare informatics. Last year nearly 3,000 people came through the door of that exhibition. We have a conference stream where we'll be addressing some of the issues that I've been talking about today. We have an app village within the exhibition area, which is a great place if you're a developer who wants to exhibit and you want to reach potential either purchasers or recommenders of your products within the NHS. We hope to get a broader community there, but certainly traditional visitors at EHI Live are people working in the NHS, either in management, commissioners, or in IT within the NHS. And we have a build your own app workshop where we've got some interesting cross-platform development tools, an open source tool, and I've seen an expert in this tool build an app in front of a live audience from a what would you like your app to do, Ian, to a working prototype in 3 minutes. I don't expect you to be able to do it in 3 minutes, but you can probably take something home if you're willing to spend half an hour in that workshop to show and impress your children. Unless you're a professional developer, in which case you probably won't be impressed by what you've produced in half an hour. And that's the web link for that. So we hope to see many of you there. The conference stream is actually a new venture for Handy. It's the first event we've charged for. But the App Village and the exhibition is free, and so is the Build Your Own App workshop, as indeed is the EHI exhibition and a number of the other streams at that conference. So do come along to the NEC in November. How can you help us? Well, come and join us. If you've not already signed up on the website, please do so. There are a number of local groups, the Midlands, London, North East, Leeds, and one I've forgotten. We're just about to launch a group in Scotland. Do indicate where you're interested. Follow us on Twitter, watch that hashtag, and come and talk to us after the event.